I never thought God would lead me to see something so horrifying that even today my voice trembles when I recount it. That early morning I was praying and fasting when the clock struck 3:33, the air became unbearable, the walls of my room creaked, and a thick shadow descended as if tearing me from the world. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was no longer there. The Spirit had transported me to the place of eternal damnation. What followed was a fleeting vision, an urgent message. If you are listening to this, write in the comments what country you are following me from, because I want to pray for you and your family. This is not entertainment, it is a warning. I found myself in an endless valley, covered in ash and flames. The ground burned beneath my feet, and columns of smoke rose from the horizon like twisted towers. The screams were so loud they felt like knives piercing my ears. The smell was unbearable, sulfur, blood, and burnt flesh. As I walked, I heard a deep voice boom like thunder, "Look carefully, for you will speak of what you see." Then, before me, a precipice opened, and a ladder made of skulls descended into the abyss. I descended trembling, knowing it was not my will, but the command of heaven. Upon reaching the bottom, I saw a vision that chilled my soul. In the midst of a river of lava stood a palace built of bones and the molten gold. It was an infernal throne erected not with stones, but with human skulls that glowed with eternal fire. Upon that throne sat a man whose figure I recognized immediately, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, the drug lord who had terrorized entire nations with blood, cocaine, and death. Escobar was clothed in a mantle of shadows that clung to his skin like snakes. On his head he wore a red-hot iron crown encrusted with diamonds that wept blood. Satan himself stood before him, placing that crown upon him as a trophy. With a mocking voice, he said to him, "On earth, you were king of Medellin, but here you are my eternal servant. Your throne is not one of glory, it is one of humiliation. I crowned you not for your riches, but for the blood you spilled. Every life you took was a brick in this palace. Every young person you ruined with your poison was a diamond in your crown." The demons around him applauded with laughter, raising deformed weapons and shouting the names of their victims. Each clap was like a whip falling upon Escobar. I saw that instead of skin, he had open scars that would never heal. His face still retained recognizable features, but it was distorted by pain. His mouth screamed, but instead of words, embers came out, burning him from within. The most terrifying thing was not the throne itself, but what it represented. Escobar was not in an isolated cell like other convicts. He was on display as a trophy of Satan. Thousands of souls looked at him and wept, not out of compassion, but because they had followed in his footsteps. I saw young men dragged away in chains, bearing tattoos and wearing t-shirts with his face on them, like fans in a stadium. They had glorified his violence, sung corridos in his honor, celebrated his power. Now they were there sharing his condemnation, trapped in an eternal applause that was torture. Satan mocked him. "Remember when you said you'd rather have a grave in Colombia than a prison in the United States? Here is your grave, and it is eternal. You said you were the master of evil, and I am your master now. Your money didn't buy heaven, your power didn't buy mercy. Every blood pact you made was my signature on your soul." I saw demons disguised as hitmen surrounding him, repeating phrases he had uttered in life. Every word he spoke on earth was now used as an accusation in hell. "I'd rather die than surrender," the demons shouted as they chained him tighter. "Money can buy anything," they repeated as they filled their mouths with burning embers in the form of burning banknotes. The Spirit spoke to me clearly, "Look closely, because many still venerate him as an idol, as an example of power, but they don't see where he ended up. Tell them that this throne is not one of glory, it is one of shame. What the world calls success, heaven calls condemnation, and what he sowed of violence, he now reaps multiplied." My knees trembled. I saw Escobar trying to get up, but each time he did it, his throne burned him more intensely. He couldn't escape, he couldn't flee. He was condemned to be king of a kingdom of pain, displayed as an eternal trophy of hell. I understood that Satan doesn't crown to honor, he crowns to humiliate, to show how he uses men and then discards them. Escobar's burning throne wasn't alone. Around it stretched a kind of infernal cartel, an army of demons disguised as hitmen who acclaimed him not as a leader, but as a crowned slave. They wore blood-stained suits and carried deformed weapons, red-hot iron rifles that fired liquid fire. Each shot didn't kill, but multiplied the screams of the condemned souls. I understood that hell had recreated a twisted version of his earthly empire, not to glorify him, but to use him as an eternal mockery. I saw how thousands of souls who had died in drug wars were forced to march in ranks like a lifeless army. Each one bore the name of the city where they had fallen on their forehead: Medellin, Cali, Bogota, Mexico City, Miami. Every step they took raised embers from the ground and chained them even tighter. Satan laughed, pointing at Escobar. Look at your sign. They aren't men, they're shadows. They aren't soldiers, they're trophies. They didn't die for you, they died for me. You thought you were a boss, but you were just my puppet. Escobar tried to speak, but burning bills poured from his mouth, dissolving in the air like ashes. The demons gathered them up and hurled them back at him like blades. His wealth, which in life had bought wills and built empires, was now his torture. He cut each fiery bill and marked it with phrases from ancient pacts. I read on one: blood for power; on another, cocaine for souls; on yet another, death for a throne. The audience of the damned acclaimed him with a unified cry: Master, Master, Master. But it wasn't admiration, it was mockery. Each time they chanted that title, a new crown formed above his head, made of red-hot iron, crushing his temples until he bled. Satan delighted in the spectacle. The world called you master, I called you slave. The world feared you. Here you are, my entertainment. This is your inheritance: a billboard of lamentations, an empire of ashes, a throne of fire. The demons began to parade before him, imitating scenes from his life. One threw bundles of money that transformed into snakes, another displayed luxurious houses that collapsed in seconds, others recreated the parties with women and excesses, but each laugh turned into weeping. It was like a macabre theater where each of his sins was repeated eternally, not for his enjoyment, but to torture him. I saw a river of liquid cocaine flowing before the throne. Souls were forced to drink it like water, but each sip burned them from within, tearing at their insides. The chief demon screamed, "This was your altar. Here you offered entire generations to the white powder. Here you thought you had power, and now this river will be your eternal inheritance." Escobar wept. His hands tried to cover his face, but the chains forced him to look. The spirit spoke to me, "See how the enemy transforms gifts into chains." Escobar had strategic intelligence, leadership skills, organizational abilities, all of that could have been used for good, to uplift his nation, to bless his people, but he chose blood. He chose money. He chose fear, and what is not consecrated to heaven becomes a weapon of hell. Now his gifts are a caricature in this eternal cartel. I saw a book of burning contracts before the throne. It wasn't written with ink, but with blood. Every pact he signed, every betrayal, every murder was recorded there. Satan displayed it as a trophy. Look, Pablo, you didn't need to write with a quill pen. Your signature was every life you took, every orphan child, every widow's, every terrified city was my signature. You weren't a boss, you were a notary of my contracts. The most horrifying thing was when I saw young people today, spiritually connected to that scene. Some watched series about him, others listened to corridors exalting his name, others had tattoos of his face. Each one was linked to the throne by dark threads that descended from the earth to the abyss. I understood that the culture still kept him alive, not in glory, but in torment. His throne was fueled by the idolatry of a generation that calls him a hero instead of a warning. The Spirit told me, tell them to stop glorifying the fallen one. Tell them that every series, every song, every mural that exalts him is a spark that fuels this fire. Tell them that his name is not an inspiration, it is a warning, because what was sown in blood reaps condemnation, and anyone who admires his throne risks sitting on one just like it. Satan turned to me and shouted at me in a mocking voice, "Do you see my strategy? I take a man, crown him with corrupt power, use him as an idol, and when he falls, I display him as a trophy, and meanwhile, millions follow, trapped in the same net. That is my art, that is my reign. My soul trembled at the sight. Escobar wasn't just a condemned man, he was a monument of warning, a king of ash sitting on a throne he never asked for, but which he himself built with his choice. I understood that hell doesn't reward, it humiliates, it doesn't crown to exalt, it crowns to display. The roar of hell stopped for an instant, a deep, invisible bell tolled 3 times in the air, and Satan raised his hand like a judge calling for order. Before the throne of bones and fire, a huge table appeared covered with burning objects. They were deformed crowns, each one heavier and more grotesque than the last. They weren't symbols of glory, they were instruments of torture. Each crown was made of chains, small skulls, and shiny stones that looked diamonds, but they were actually solidified tears of the souls Escobar had condemned with his decisions. Satan took the first one and raised it proudly. "This is your crown for the blood of the innocent," he shouted. He placed it forcefully on his head, and immediately the red-hot iron pierced his skin. I saw each burning jewel explode like a bullet entering his skull. Escobar's screams shook the plaza, but the demons celebrated with uproarious laughter. He took another and said, "This is for the orphan children you left in Medellin, for every house destroyed by your violence. Their tears are your diamonds, and each tear will be an eternal weight on your head." He placed it on top of the first, and the weight bent his neck almost to the breaking point. He tried to straighten up, but each attempt only sank him deeper into the burning throne. The third crown was made of incandescent banknotes, intertwined with iron thorns. Satan declared, "This is for the money you worshipped, for every covenant you made with politicians, for every altar you erected in blood-stained mansions. Your god was money, and now your god is your torment." He adjusted it on his forehead, and immediately the burning bills melted into his skin, etching phrases in flames of silver or lead. I saw other crowns being brought by lesser demons, each corresponding to a specific crime, one for the women exploited at his parties, another for the hitman he trained to kill, another for every church he corrupted with bribes, yet another for the hidden pacts with witches and sorcerers. Each crown added an unbearable weight to his head until his figure was bent over, his neck broken, his gaze lost on the burning ground. The spirit spoke to me, "Look how the enemy turns human titles into chains." The world called him king, boss, chief. Here, those titles are condemnation. Each crown on his head is an eternal reminder of what he sowed. What the earth celebrates as power, heaven displays as shame. The most terrifying thing was that each crown not only tortured him but also radiated a dark fire toward the multitudes. I saw threads of shadow extending to the earth, inspiring new criminal groups, cartels that still operate today, young people who dream of being bosses. Each of Escobar's crimes continued to multiply through his spiritual legacy. Satan mockingly pointed out, "The more I crown him here, the more imitatorships are born there. His condemnation is my seed, his torment is my propaganda." Christ appeared in the midst of that scene, his light pierced the darkness, and in a firm voice he said, "He who sows violence will reap violence, he who raises up idols of blood will reap eternal tears. Let no one be deceived, God cannot be mocked. What a man sows, that he will reap." His words made some crowns tremble above Escobar's head, as if they wanted to fall, but they didn't fall. They were sealed because he had never repented in life. Escobar wept blood, his lips tried to form words of repentance, but only burning bills and embers came from his mouth. He tried to shout forgiveness, but the crowns crushed him, twisting each syllable into blasphemy. Satan approached and whispered mockingly to him, "You had your chance, God sent you signs, preachers, warnings, but you preferred power. Now your crowns are eternal, you will reign, yes, but on a throne of pain." The audience of the damned shouted, "Boss, boss." And each scream was a whip that fanned the flames of their crowns. I saw how souls who in life had admired his figure were dragged to that infernal theater. Many screamed with rage, others with confusion. They didn't know that their admiration had also been a pact. Now they were there, enslaved to the echo of their own words. The Spirit spoke to me again, "Tell them not to be deceived by human crowns. The only true crown is the crown of righteousness that the Lord will give to those who love him. Every other title is smoke, every other throne is ashes, and every misdirected admiration becomes a chain. Don't play with idolatry, because the price is always paid. The scene ended with Satan raising the last crown made of molten chains and human skulls. He placed it upon his head and said, "This is your final prize, the crown of terror, for you sowed fear and today you reap eternal fear. You will be king, but of corpses, you will be master, but of screams, you will be lord, but of shadows." The vision became unbearable. The weight of the crowns was so brutal that I felt my own neck bend. I fell to my knees, weeping, crying out, "Lord, have mercy on our generation." And then I heard the voice from heaven, "Speak what you saw, do not be silent, for many continue to play with false crowns and do not know that the day will come when they will wear them forever." After the coronation, the scene changed. The burning throne vanished in black smoke, and I was taken along with the multitudes of the damned toward a kind of infernal city. At first, I did not understand what I was seeing, but soon I recognized the outlines. It was a distorted copy of Medellin, the city that Escobar had marked with blood and fear. Its streets were made of embers and bones, its buildings were mountains of stacked skulls, and instead of electric lights, there were demonic torches burning with green fire. The demons forced him to walk those streets, carrying their deformed crowns on his head. Every step he took ignited flames beneath his feet, as if the city itself rejected him. On the burning walls, scenes from his life were projected: car bombs, massacres, the assassinations of judges, kidnappings, betrayals. Each memory was a fiery mirror that forced him to gaze endlessly. I saw a football stadium erected in the center of that city, but it wasn't filled with fans, but with weeping shadows. In the demonic stands, thousands of souls pointed at him while repeating songs that on earth glorified him. Now those chants has become chains that bound him to the ground. I understood that hell had built a Medellin of shadows as a parody of its kingdom and that Escobar was condemned to rule it forever, not as a glorious king, but as a slave of humiliation. The most terrible thing was the children. I saw thousands of them walking in a procession, dressed in dirty t-shirts, some with deformed weapons in their hands. They weren't real children, but projections of the thousands who died because of the violence, of those who grew up orphaned, of those who imitated his path. Each one bore the mark of a burning bullet on their forehead. They shouted, "Master, you promised us a future and gave us chains." Their voices were knives piercing his soul. The demons organized a macabre parade. Armored cars made of red-hot iron passed before him, with faces plastered on the windshields. Like trophies, shadow helicopters hovered over the city, dropping liquid fire on the doomed crowds. It was all a grotesque spectacle, a satanic replica of the opulence he had known in life. Satan appeared on a balcony in that twisted city and shouted, "This is your eternal Medellin. Here there is no cocaine or money, here there are only ashes and lamentations. You were king of the city on earth, now you are its jailer in hell." Escobar fell to his knees trying to cover his ears, but every street echoed his most famous phrases, silver or lead. It could be heard from one corner. Transformed into a chorus of demons, the kingpin of evil resonated in another as a constant mockery. I saw how the phrases that once made him feared became hammers that struck him relentlessly. The Spirit spoke to me, "See how hell recycles what earth glorifies. Every street he stained with blood is now a corridor of fire. Every neighborhood he controlled with fear is now a shadow theater, and what on earth they called cunning, here is a chain. Tell them not to glorify what ended in ashes. Tell them they shouldn't make series, songs, or murals that glorify the fallen, because every clap feeds this infernal city." Then I saw a dark river flowing through the center of that twisted Medellin. It wasn't water, it was white powder transformed into burning liquid. Souls were being dragged into it, forced to drink it while they screamed. It was as if every kilo of drugs he exported in life had been transformed into eternal poison that now devoured his followers. Satan pointed at him and said, "This river is your legacy, Pablo. You thought you were moving money, but you were moving souls. Every shipment you sent was a seed of damnation, and now you reap what you sowed." Christ appeared again, walking on that river of fire as one who walks on water. His voice silenced the infernal city for a moment. "He who digs a pit will fall into it. He who builds on violence reaps ruin. This is the destiny of those who place ambition above truth. Tell them not to admire thrones of blood, because every human throne crumbles before my justice. Heaven opened for a second, and I saw mothers on earth praying for their children so that they would not follow that path. Each prayer fell like a spark of light upon the infernal Medellin, weakening its walls. Satan roared with rage, "Close their mouths, do not let them pray. Every prayer is a blow against my city." I then saw Escobar trying to get up, but the wreaths were too heavy. His knees burned against the ground. He shouted the names of his family, but no voice answered him. On his earthly throne he had an army, mansions, and power. In hell, he only had a twisted city of shadows that hated and accused him. The spirit whispered to me forcefully, "Tell them that this is the truth no one wants to speak. Violence doesn't build empires, it builds eternal prisons." What he sowed in Medellin is now a mirror for those who follow him. Every young man who sings his songs, who dreams of being a boss, is walking toward these same burning streets. Warn them, because there is still time to escape. The twisted city began to vanish in plumes of smoke. The ground trembled, and in the center appeared a gigantic table made of volcanic stone. On it lay scrolls, parchments, and books that burned like live coals. Satan caressed them with his claws and said mockingly, "Welcome to the judgment of the pacts. Here is the true legacy of your life, Pablo Escobar. It wasn't just bullets, it wasn't just money, it was pacts. Every word, every drop of blood spilled, every secret altar was my signature on your soul." The demons opened the first scroll. It was written in fresh blood that never dried. It read, "Silver for obedience." It was the pact he used to buy wills. Satan held it up and shouted, "With this contract you bought judges, police officers, politicians. You said that money could do anything, and every bribe was an altar to me. That money wasn't innocent, it was the seed of eternal chains." Every burning word transformed into a serpent that coiled around Escobar's neck, squeezing him until he fell to his knees. The second parchment was filled with crossed-out names. They were victims of murder, journalists, magistrates, entire families. The phrase written over them was, "Death for the throne." Satan smiled. "Every bullet you fired was a signature of your pact with me. You didn't need ink, your lead was enough. Here is written the price of your crown. You weren't the king of Medellin, you were the notary of my kingdom." Each name crossed out burned like fire in his temples. And Escobar screamed, trying to tear the crowns from his head, but the chains prevented him. The third contract was even more terrifying. It was signed with strange symbols, with black letters that seemed to move like insects. The spirit revealed to me, this was a pact with sorcerers and witches. Before every operation, before every confrontation, he consulted dark altars. He spilled blood not only in the streets, but in rituals. He surrendered his soul to powers that now claim him as a trophy. Satan raised that parchment, and the shadows roared with jubilation. Demons disguised as priests began to dance around, repeating phrases in profane tongues. The fourth parchment showed current, young faces with Escobar tattoos, television series that glorified him, corridors that exalted him. Above it was written, "Legacy by imitation." Satan shouted with satisfaction, "Your pact didn't end with your death, Pablo. You live on every time a young person invokes me by your name, every time they call him a hero, every time they imitate you. This contract is renewed with every clap, every series, every song. You remain useful to me even in death." I saw how the threads of those contracts extended into the earth. They reached nightclubs where corridors were sung in his honor, neighborhoods where his face was painted in murals, digital platforms where his story was sold as entertainment. Each reproduction was like a new signature on the contract. Escobar wept, but Satan forced him to look. "You see? You keep signing, even though you are condemned. Your silence and your legacy serve me. Your cartel didn't die, your cartel is spiritual and eternal." Christ appeared again, and his light made the scrolls tremble. In a firm voice, he declared, "He who makes a covenant with blood reaps condemnation. He who sells his soul for power has already received his payment, but my blood breaks covenants. Tell the living that no contract of hell can withstand repentance, that even if their family, their culture, or their generation is bound, A sincere confession sets them free. Tell them there is still time to break these bonds, but they must do so aloud, confessing my name. I saw some contracts begin to burn brighter, as if they were weak before that declaration. Satan shrieked, "No, no. These are mine. They were signed with deeds, not words. No one can break them." Christ answered, "My cross has more power than any signature of death. What was signed in shadows can be broken in light, but he who clings to idols repeats the signature, and many today continue to sign it every time they exalt him as a hero." The Spirit spoke to me, "Tell them that silence is a pact, that every time they keep silent about the truth, they sign against it, that every time they exalt violence or corrupt power, they reaffirm the chains, and that only by confessing Christ aloud can this judgment be broken." Escobar screamed, trying to tear the scrolls from Satan's hands, but they clung to his skin like burning tattoos. His arms were covered with phrases that accused him: silver or lead, blood for power, death for a throne. Each tattoo burned and transformed into chains that dragged him back to his throne of fire. The infernal tribunal shouted in unison, "Guilty! Guilty! Guilty!" And each shout added another lock to the contracts. Escobar fell defeated, the crowns piercing his skull and the parchments burning on his skin. Satan pointed at him and declared, "You are my trophy of pacts. You were king of blood and now you are king of chains. Reign, Pablo, reign forever in your medallion of shadows." The table of the contracts dissolved into black smoke, and suddenly I was taken to an immense structure, like a colosseum made of volcanic rock and columns of molten fire. The place vibrated with distorted chants. They weren't human voices, but demonic shrieks mimicking applause. High above, in letters of burning coals, was written, "Theater of Hell." There, the damned not only suffered, but were also used as entertainment to mock humanity. Escobar was dragged in chains to the center of that arena. His body burned. His crowns melted into his skin, and the parchments that accused him were unfurled around him like banners. The demons shouted, "The boss, the boss, the boss." But it wasn't admiration, it was scorn. Satan appeared on an iron balcony and announced in a mocking voice, "Today we present our King of Shadows, Pablo Escobar, the man who thought he ruled Colombia, the one who believed he could defy governments and armies. Look at him now, my eternal clown." A multitude of the damned filled the stands, forced to applaud and shout. Each clap was not voluntary. Invisible chains compelled them. Some wept as they shouted "Boss," others blasphemed, but all were trapped in the same theater. I saw how each soul represented those who in life had celebrated his name, watched his series, sung his songs. Hell had gathered them to mock themselves. Suddenly, a screen of fire ignited in the middle of the Colosseum. Scenes from his life began to be projected as if they were a film. The parties with mountains of money, the massacres of innocents, the speeches of power, the betrayals. Each scene was applauded by demons disguised as presenters. One of them shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, here is the boss who changed the history of a country, not with love, not with justice, but with fear and blood." Laughter filled the theater. Escobar tried to speak, but the iron microphone reappeared in front of his mouth. Every time he opened his mouth to beg for mercy, embers flew out and transformed into bundles of burning bills. The demons collected these bills and threw them to the audience like souvenirs. The damned souls received them with cries of pain, because each bill turned into a snake that coiled around their bodies. The spectacle continued with demonic choreography. Legions of shadows imitated hitmen, firing liquid firearms into the air. Others imitated corrupt politicians signing burning contracts. Everything was parody, everything was mockery. Satan shouted from his balcony, "This is how I run the world. I give idols, they make them heroes, and when they die, I turn them into theater, and millions continue to fall for the same deception." The Spirit spoke to me, "Look well at this theater, because it is a mirror of what happens on earth. Today they make series that glorify him, songs that exalt him, documentaries that present him as a genius, but they don't see that what the earth applauds is an eternal clown. Hell ridicules. Tell them not to participate in this play, because every human applause transforms into an eternal chain." The screen of fire showed another scene. present-day multitudes on earth seeing his image on screens, shouting his name, venerating his figure. Every human applause fell like a spark in the Colosseum, fanning the flames of the spectacle. Satan raised his arms and said, "Thank you, humanity, keep glorifying my trophies, each of your applauses fuels this theater." Escobar wept blood, his body, bent by the weight of the crowns, tried to tear off the chains, but they only melted deeper into his skin. His eyes stared at the stands in terror, as if he knew that every face there was a mirror of those who had followed him. His lips tried to form words, but only forgiveness was heard, and immediately the microphone transformed him into burning banknotes. Christ appeared in a ray of light that pierced the Colosseum. His voice silenced demons and the damned for an instant. "Do not be deceived. This is not a spectacle, it is a sentence. Hell exhibits what the world idolizes to show its emptiness. Let him who has ears hear, for many today still call him a hero, but here he is an eternal slave. Do not glorify what heaven condemns. Do not imitate what it destroys. Do not remain silent before the truth." The words of Christ caused some invisible chains in the stands to break. I saw souls that, though condemned, wept with a cry that seemed like confession, but Satan raised his scepter and extinguished those lights. "There is no second chance here," he roared. "Repentance belongs to the living, not the dead." And the theater roared again with laughter. The Spirit whispered to me, "Tell them that as long as they have life, there is still a chance, that they shouldn't wait for this theater to understand, that they should confess now, break their chains now, renounce idols now, because tomorrow may be too late." The spectacle ended with a demonic ovation. Escobar was dragged back to his throne, carrying his crowns and his contracts. The entire Colosseum chanted, "Reign, boss, reign in ashes," and I understood that this was his eternity, not only to suffer, but to be used as a warning. As a clown in a macabre theater where hell mocks humanity, when the infernal theater went dark, a heavy silence fell. It covered the place. It wasn't peace. It was the breath of a judgment about to be pronounced. Suddenly I saw an enormous book open in the air, much larger than the blood contracts. Its cover was made of light, and on it was written, "The Book of Generations." I knew in my spirit that there were written not only the names of the living, but also the traces they inherit from their parents, their idols, their cultures. Christ himself took the book and opened it. His face was solemn, his eyes full of fire and sadness. He pointed to a page where the name of Pablo Escobar was written, but he was not alone. Beneath his name, like the roots of a tree, extended the names of thousands of young people, families, cities, and nations that had been marked by his legacy. Each line descended to the earth, connecting generations that still lived. Satan stepped forward, laughing mockingly. "See how great my work is. A man served me in life, and now his shadow, he rules generations. Look at the young people who venerate him as a hero. Look at the series that exalt him, the songs that immortalize him. His name is no longer just his own, it's a seed in the culture, and who can uproot such a deep tree?" Christ closed the book for a moment and held it aloft. His voice resounded like thunder. "I am the one who uproots trees. I am the one who cuts generational chains. No matter how strong the legacy of evil, my cross weighs more, and although Paul is already sentenced, those who follow him can still escape. Because those who choose to confess my name will not inherit chains, those who break with their idols will not inherit condemnation." Then the book opened again, and I saw some roots begin to burn. They were families on earth who were renouncing the idolatry of Escobar. I saw a young man tear down a poster in his room, a mother destroyed a mural in her house, a musician threw lyrics glorifying violence into the fire. Each act of renunciation uprooted a dark root and transformed it into light. Satan roared, trying to stop him, but his claws could not touch the Book of Generations. Christ turned to me and said, "Tell them that this is the time to decide, that their inheritance is not written in stone, but in their choice, that even if their family, their neighborhood, or their culture glorifies fallen